Randy K here. We all go through struggles at times, and I want to share with you through stories and insights and interviews with others how much God loves you. He loves you immensely, and that's what I hope you will hear through our interviews and what we have to share with you. Thanks for staying tuned. Here we go. Welcome to this episode of Revelations from Heaven. My guest today, Dr. Mark McDonough. Well, he suffered a traumatic injury, burning most of his body in an accident that happened at home when he was a child, a fire that destroyed not only the home but his family. He was in the hospital, most of his body burned. He suffered from major injuries, and then he went through a near-death experience. What he has to share with us will change you. It certainly has changed me. Subsequent to this, Dr. Mark McDonough has dedicated his life to helping others. He is a surgeon by training, and he has helped surgery in terms of helping other burn patients, and he has done philanthropic work throughout his life. So, Mark, it is great to have you with us today.
Thank you, and it's a pleasure to be here. It's an honor.
Well, the honor is all ours, Mark. I know you have, this takes you back to a memory that is far from pleasant, traumatic, and caused post-traumatic syndrome for a child that goes through this experience. But I'll let you begin with where you want to bring us through what precipitated and led up to this event.
Well, thank you. Yes, I did think a lot of events like these, they're not first choice topics for discussion, but trying and challenging times, I think, in my life have shaped me more than anything else. As difficult as they may be, the positive experiences that come out on the other side have been quite rewarding. And so as a youngster, I had several medical experiences. I had a neurological disease called Guillain-Barré syndrome, which is a viral infection of the insulin around peripheral nerves. It caused complete paralysis and loss of my ability to breathe on my own. I was about 5 or 6, between kindergartens, I like to say. I had to repeat kindergarten because I was taken out of school long enough, but overcame Guillain-Barré and the rehabilitation associated with it, and then had a burn injury at age 16 when our family's home, as you said, caught fire. It took the lives of my mom and a younger brother, both of whom I was trying to get out at the time, but I got trapped on the opposite side of the house where my other brothers were. I was the oldest of 5 boys. We had no sisters. And my father was out of town the night of the fire. But I was trapped, overcome by smoke inhalation and severe burns. My mother and younger brother did not survive. But that experience opened my eyes to the whole world of medicine. And at a young age, certainly also the world of trial and tribulation in this fallen world of which we're all God's kids. My mom and dad were believers, and we grew up Roman Catholic, attended Catholic services when we could. But it was not the focus or center of my life as it is today. When I say it, I mean God and Christian living. I knew who Jesus was. I knew Jesus had died for us, so that we would have life in eternity, hopefully with him. But it wasn't a frequent topic of discussion. And, there were things I questioned about Catholicism, things I struggled with and was confused about. The whole concept of confession, and that no women could be leaders in the church, and there were different things like that that I was confused about. But from a young age, my mother shared a story with me where she survived a difficult illness and felt she saw angels near her bed, and we were always encouraged and free to speak, to talk about Jesus, and God or religion, and challenge and question things. Our parents were very open-minded in that sense, but we weren't. I wouldn't identify our family as a religious. Um, my I think the fire, certainly the early things that happened, my recovery from Guillain-Barré. I know my mom and I shared several times our fears and concerns. I know certainly I did. I was always afraid of being abandoned by them, being a broken child and unable to walk, having to have so much physical therapy. When my parents would visit in the hospital, I'd have my dad leave his watch when they went to get coffee, leave it on the bedside stand. So I knew they'd come back. You know, I felt he wouldn't leave his watch, and me too. Um, but it's interesting looking back at facing those kinds of concepts that early in life. I mean, was I suffering this disease because God was punishing me? Was I, you know, was I responsible for these challenges in life because I was a bad kid? And now that I was broken, what if the doctors couldn't fix me? Was I worthy of the love that I felt I was getting from my parents? But, you know, those concepts of what happens when we do die or if we die. I know I do remember being very afraid of not being able to breathe. And so certainly I struggled with those concepts at an early age. Um, you know, good kids go to heaven, bad kids go to hell, those kinds of things you pick up and get laid in the network of memories and experiences that kind of shape our belief systems. But um, as a teenager, then suffering the loss of my mother and brother and lying in a hospital bed, knowing I screamed bloody murder to for help or relief. You know, when I came to in the ambulance on the way to the hospital, I didn't understand what was happening. I knew I was in pain, and I knew, God, if you're there, please take me. Please end this pain. This suffering is absolutely unbearable. I won't tolerate another second of it. And then one more second would pass by, and time just kept moving, but very slowly, 1 second at a time. The fear and the anxiety and the oh gosh, the confusion was just overwhelming. And but in any event, it was 10 days after the fire in the hospital that I was physiologically stable enough to survive what burn doctors called the first, the biggest event, and that is a debridement procedure where they take the dead skin and burn tissue from the body while you're asleep. But it's a huge physiological stress on every system in the body. So up until August 13th, this was 1976, I'm 16 years old. Um, up until 10 days after arriving at the hospital, I was physiologically unstable. My heart rhythms were fluctuating and irregular, and my breathing was completely dependent. I was on a ventilator and saturations were not good. I was losing lots and lots of fluid, unrecognizable to my father when he got back in town. As I said, he was out of town on business when the fire happened. He left the house and said, take care of your brothers and your mom. You're the man of the house now, chum, and I'll see you in a couple of days. Ironically, on the sideboard counter in the kitchen, as we left and he went out the door to the airport, we had 5 or 6 smoke detectors on the counter that we had tried to install the night before he left and didn't have the right lithium batteries. Remember, in the 70s, those batteries were, well, like they are now, but they were very new technology. But he said, well, we'll take care of that when I get home. And they were all laying out there on the counter. And I mean, I can't imagine the suffering that he survived. And to get that call, we were in, I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, and he was on business for the first time in San Francisco. And got a call from dear friends of ours to say that Dorothy and or Toby is with Christ. Dorothy is near death, and so is Mark. There's been a terrible fire, and you need to come home. I can't imagine coming into the hospital and seeing me, but I was unrecognizable, as I said. The swelling and edema from burn injury is immense, and the fluid requirements. The body's losing liters and liters of fluid from the skin and from the wounds, and the organs are trying to survive and get their blood supply. So in that first hour of that kind of injury, any kind of shock and trauma, but more so with burn injuries, that all the major organ systems are under immense amounts of stress. And the physician's goal is to provide fluid and resuscitate with fluid, so that the heart won't stop, the brain won't shut down, the kidneys won't collapse. But all that was starting to happen already when he arrived, and the doctors were doing everything they could to keep me stable. And then, of course, as I said, I made it at least 10 days till they felt I was stable enough to survive that first surgery. But it was during that surgery that I actually felt the pain of what the doctors were doing and the debridement, and realized that I was awake. I was supposed to be asleep, and paralyzed, and I was both of those, but still conscious. So I was hearing what the doctors were saying. And it's a phenomenon that happens rarely, but it does happen. And it's called intraoperative awareness. And anesthesia requires, in certain cases, paralysis. And with burn patients, that was common back in the 70s. But we also didn't have H2 blockers, which was prophylaxis for ulceration of the internal stomach lining from stress and cortisol that's released into the body, all the adrenaline from that shock and trauma. So being awake and suffering the pain, I'm screaming to God to end this. I can't take one more second of this. They don't know that I'm awake. And I'm feeling the skin being torn from my arms and my abdomen. And I felt a resident standing to the side of the table pick my arm up and drop it to the side. I could feel the blood dripping off. Somebody said we're losing copious amounts of blood. And then they determined that it was coming from my rectum. And so my stomach lining had ulcerated from the pain and the stress. And so now the blood pressure was dropping and my heart actually arrested. I'll take a sip of fluid. Speaking of fluids, in any event, I recognized the dire situation, but I was in so much pain and agony and screaming, God, you have to end this. If you're there, please rescue me from this. I can't take one more second. Same exact thoughts I had in the ambulance on the way to the hospital when I came to and remembered that, the fire had happened and all of a sudden I had this feeling that everything was okay, that I was in complete peace and tranquility. And I describe it as lying on the beach with my eyes closed and feeling that gentle warmth and sunlight through my eyelids, and that soft, comfortable feeling. And then I was in a position like as though I were in a lazy boy recliner and just sort of floating and hovering above my body. And I felt the presence of God in the sense of a love that is just so difficult to put into words, but a sense of love and security that's almost indescribable. But everything is okay in this moment. It always has been, it is now, and it always will be. There's nothing to be afraid of. And that feeling that I was being held in Jesus's hand, or that he was just cupping me in the palm of his hand. But also I felt the presence of my mom and my brother and my grandfather that died when I was 1. And just not their physical body and faces did I see, but their very presence, as if we were all comfortably, cozied up in blankets on the couch watching TV, but completely aware of each other's thoughts. And I knew that God was saying, this is a difficult challenge, but it's one we could do together, and that I'm with you. I won't leave you. All those fears of abandonment that I identified, or now I'm identified as an adult, I look back at the Guillain-Barré recovery and surviving that, um, and remembering those fears of being left at the hospital by my parents or being abandoned by God. And would I, because I'm not worthy of their love or acceptance, all of that completely turned to a sense of security and comfort and protection, provision. Um, the characteristics that I now understand of Jesus, the Holy Spirit, of God, of the Trinity, and each, the provision of the Father and my buddy Jesus. We're going to make this. You're going to handle this. It's not going to be easy. And that was another thing. People frequently say, well, was it your decision to live some more or to not? Because the feeling was I've always been okay. I am now. This is right where I want to stay. Everything's good. But the understanding was that now was not my time, and it wasn't like it was my decision, or God's, or my mom's, or my father. I understood all the perspectives, the different perspectives, and accepted them. And it was as though there were a board meeting, and everybody concluded the best outcome would be a challenging one, but the right one, and that things were as they should be. The euphoria and the happiness, the laughter, as quickly as I could think of a question, the answer was there. Why are the kids starving in Africa? And and the answers were just so simple and joyful, and that aha, just a bombardment of aha moments, and going, of course it's this simple. Oh my God, literally, oh my God, of course. And yes, right on. Just repeatedly saying, go God. And just like I and an entire cheering section were all there to say, we know we don't know. We know you do, and we're cool with that. And understanding that I don't need to have all the answers, that I'm just right where I am, and that it should be just the way it is. It was just a sense that, okay. And how fortunate, I remember I didn't come around, or was not until something like 11 o'clock that night, and had gone into surgery very early, and saying to my dad, I think I met Jesus, and saying, I know all this stuff. People kept coming in the room saying, boy, you almost bit the big one. You almost bought the farm. Boy, you don't know how. And I kept wanting to go, you don't know. No, no, no. You're missing. And I couldn't even I'm on the ventilator, so I can't talk anyway. But when I could whisper to my dad and saying, boy, I think I met Jesus. And he'd always say, we just have to trust God. But that was not enough of an answer for a kid. And now here I'm saying the same thing and going, I'm not sure what's up ahead, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be okay. And in that kind of a scary moment, to even have that attitude, and it was something that we shared through the years thereafter, and a lot of struggles, and came back to that night and that awareness. But
And you were how old at this
16, coming up on my 17th birthday. So it was August 13th, a Friday the 13th. And my dad had some superstitions or premonitions like that. But I remember 13 became a lucky number for us in our family. We didn't believe in luck, but the word itself comes from, Lucifer's name comes from the same Luc root. And so we didn't believe in luck, but we believed that we believed. And so on a Friday the 13th, every Friday he would definitely call me, no matter where I was in the world, all the years he lived, to say happy birthday, because he's always felt that was a new birth, a rebirth. And then at that age, I didn't know anything about near-death experiences, but over the years, I went on to look into them deeply with the director of the burn unit was actually the one who introduced me to near-death experience and the concept, and some of the original books by Moody and Atwater. And it was just, it was I think something special for my dad, and that we shared together. But um, what he could miss my actual belly button birthday, but that was a transforming experience for both of us. And the
Mm.
day,
And you had at the time over what, 65% of your body, I believe,
Mhm.
was burned.
Right, right.
And you had actually gone in at the time of the fire and tried to save your mother, and then
Well,
you.
I woke from the heat, and a glow of orange, infiltrating the room, just a light glow, orange glow. And as I came to, I recognized, I mean, very, very quickly, that there's a fire, and the sounds very, very rapidly got loud, like a tornado billowing through the walls. And the heat was immense. It's like standing in an oven when you're basting a turkey and you can't get out. And so I was looking for air and relief from the heat, but my brothers were making it out their windows. I shared a room with my brother Tim. He was climbing out his window. My brother Dan and Packy were each climbing out separate windows. I tried to go through a bathroom window to come in a window where my mother was sleeping. There was a balcony outside her room that I knew I could get to if I could get out on the roof. But I knocked the bathroom window out of its tracks, couldn't get out that window, then tried to get out the front door at the foot of the stairs. It was metal, had expanded in the heat, and I pulled with all my might and couldn't get it open. I got as low as possible to try to get out the back door, and that's where the fireman found me unconscious. So I was able to protect my face pretty well with my arms, but my arms got a lot of the extent of the injury, and shielding myself, but was overcome by the smoke inhalation, really. And a fireman actually was trying to get in through the garage entry to the house, the door, and was blocked. And he had a just strong premonition that it was a human body. It was a soft end feel, he said, and he kept pushing, and I was blocking the door.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, they found me in the fire.
Oh, you were one of the earlier individuals to share your near-death experience, and that took a lot of courage. I know now many or several individuals have shared their experience, but you really had the courage to do that. And courage really has been your underlying characteristic, I believe, Mark, in that um, when you were, and here's how I tend to piece some of these accounts together in terms of how God establishes our life subsequent to our experience. But I'm thinking back of the time that you were experiencing Jesus and he was revealing these answers to you. And obviously, you are a cerebral individual, so you're a thinker. You became a surgeon at the age of 30. You went back to school to become a surgeon. And so God was providing you these answers. And a lot of people out there, of course, they have questions for God. And you brought up one of them was, why do bad things happen to good people? And he was firing in these answers to you. So as a teenager, how do you assimilate that with your mind in this heaven realm to your mind now in the physical? How do you bring those epiphanies that God was revealing to you to your understanding now as an adult? Is it hard to interpret those answers?
Yes and no. And good question, really. Because I've often said it's a double-edged sword. The certainty of my faith is incredible, to say the least, and I'm very happy for that and about that. Where people say, "Oh, if I could just see a burning bush, then I'd be okay. Then I'd know, all right, and I'd trust every moment thereafter." Well, not so true, because I did see the burning bush. Yet I still have my doubts, my reservations, and so it becomes a double-edged sword, because I know he knows and that he is, and that's all I have to know. But my human, sinning, sinful, imperfect self, the being I am that's a result of the fall, the fact that I have knowledge of good and evil and don't know what to do with it, even though I know what to do with it, I can't meet the standard, so to speak. I'm not the man I want to be yet, but I know he will get me there. So on one side, there's that, and the other side is that human who says, "Oh, but if he really understood, he would, he couldn't know anything about this problem I'm having. I got to handle this on my own." When I'm not able to give it to him and trust, then and I'm back in that human self. I say, well, so is it a blessing or a curse that I got this near death experience and this little piece of knowledge, this little unique experience that some people, oh, now I'm recognizing lots of people have had, but still relatively small number compared to the number on the planet. Um, so I think part of my responsibility is to share that I've had it and the certainty that I know it's true. There's no doubt whatsoever. But I do think it takes daily practice and vigilance to retain that relationship, to not become rebellious. Like as a teenager, to not say to my friends, well, hey, I had this God thing happen. And, I had to kind of carefully navigate the waters, so to speak, without um, trying to sound like it was a curse and a blessing. I mean, it's certainly a blessing to have had such an opportunity to then develop that relationship with Jesus. I mean, it's just been great.
Yeah,
But
you had this increased kind of challenge that as a teenager, teenagers are not can are not the friendliest to kind of these kinds of these kinds of
oh
experiences.
no.
And so you're
And in the
vulnerable.
70s, kids were drinking beer, just starting to smoke pot in their teens, and it was a wild bunch of groups.
And here you are with this experience with Jesus and this near death experience. And at that time, there in that period of time in the 70s, 80s, very few people even heard of near death experiences, let alone accounts from individuals. I remember, when I was back in that time, I certainly didn't really, outside of an article perhaps that I might read, I didn't really hear those kinds of stories. People just weren't sharing them, and that's one of the things that for those of us who have gone through these experiences, people say, well, you must have some sense of I'll use the word enlightenment. I don't like that word, but awareness or something of that nature. And what you said was interesting because, on the one hand, yes, obviously, you're in the presence of God in this space where He's revealing things to you and to us. And the other hand, when you bring that back into your physical brain, to synthesize that download into the flesh again, it's virtually impossible, isn't it?
It is. And there's times when and I could, Bible studies, I hope to always have a Bible study, an active Bible study. I can throw stuff out, and I'm currently in one. Frequently, opportunities will come up where I'll hear myself speak and I'll pray right before speaking and say, Lord, just let me say whatever. And I don't even recognize the words as they come out. And then I go, golly, if I heard that from somebody else, what would I do? I think the guy's crazy, but, I have to be true to what I know my relationship to be with him. And then again, that's why Bible studies are so great, because they're accountability groups. They're people where I can say, hey, this is what's going on. And I know God, is ABC, but as soon as I think I know, and it's me playing God again. So I got to always be bouncing things off of people. But um, no matter what, no matter how confused I get or how challenging a day can be, I know right where to take it, because I don't have the answers. Anything good that's happening is his, not mine, or the result of that. And I just keep trusting it. But I mean, my best friend who came to visit me every day in the hospital and went through the first year of college with me as my college roommate. I mean, I shared those experiences with him, and it is it's hard to get out there and say, this is who I am. This is the truth. This is how I feel about certain kinds of behavior that we were engaged in. And, you know, when you're starting to live that way and establish that relationship, I felt I had a relationship, but nothing like I've lived my life to try to achieve as a result, directly as a result of that experience. So it all falls back on the truth I know that I acquired through the near death experience, you know. And that was a gift. It's just a blessing, no doubt.
Well, you brought that gift to others. You were the classic example, I think, Mark, of turning your pain into your purpose, because you had all of this scarring from the pain, the burns over your body, and then you went back to school to become a surgeon, and you have helped other patients to recover from their burns and to actually, go into surgery to do, it's not plastic surgery; it's reconstructive surgery,
Right.
actually. So tell us a little bit about that, because you went back to school, and then you helped a number of people who suffered from the same or similar injury that you did.
I think I know for me, my greatest reward comes in life is from sharing anything like that that someone else can identify with and use. I remember it was after the near death experience that I was allowed to go home for a 24-hour stay, and I came back to the hospital and I was resentful again at God, saying, I know it's, you know, I believe you're there, but why me? Why am I picked for this? Why does it got to be this burn injury? Or why does it got to be my mom died or this or that? And as soon as I get in the whys again, um, I can get easily frustrated and challenge and question what that belief is. I feel I lost my train of thought where you were going.
Well, it's just that
Uh,
you had the courage to be the answer to the problem, in that you became a surgeon and you helped treat others who had gone through similar injuries as yourself, that is, burn patients.
so I think what I was getting to is that we all have we if we're fortunate enough to find that niche, that special quality, and I think God gives us each something we can identify that we can share with others like that. And so sharing those challenges that others can identify with, I think I felt a certain sense of obligation, sure. Um, but also that is just the most rewarding part of it. I mean, the I had to do a lot of the cosmetic kinds of stuff in plastic surgery so that we could have the financial ability to do the reconstructive surgery that's not paid for. So I guess it was, yeah, it was a to face the challenge to go back to school late. But I remember when I first got interested in physical therapy, having had so much rehabilitation, and knew that study and curriculum was a difficult one. My science teacher discouraged me from, said, well, it's quite, I don't think you could. And that was all the motivation I needed, him telling me I couldn't do it, and pursued and was accepted to PT school. And then 8 years after practicing said, I really think I can go back and do more. And so it was certainly, I guess, a challenge, but very rewarding in the sense it was self-motivating.
I know that having worked with and been trained in the clinical realm myself, and worked with clinicians, that clinicians tend to be very technically minded, because of the precision that's required, especially in surgery, to be successful in that. So when you obviously as a teenager you had that mind that was the ability to process things from a technical perspective as well, I assume. But you saw in your near death experience, you saw your mother, and she had passed into heaven by this time, correct? So you saw your mother and those who had passed before you.
Mm-hmm.
You saw them, and you had this kind of this sense of them which is more than a sight. And so it seemed like God was speaking to you
Hmm.
through, even though you were maybe technically minded, he was giving you this sense of knowing that I find very interesting.
Yeah, I think, and others who've shared their stories, like yours is different in mine in the sense that you had that experience with those other human type beings, those copper, yeah, you described and the message that you were, I think he gives us this special ability to read between the lines. I always wonder what speaking in tongues is all about. I haven't studied it in great depth, but I know, I mean, why so many languages on the planet? God gives us these all kinds of ways of communicating. And so for me, that was this this like mental telepathy with my brother, my mom, and my grandpa. And my grandpa I hadn't thought of ever. I don't, except to know that he was around sometime before I was born, or for a short time after I was born. So why did he choose that? It's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, you were actually you were seeing them through your spiritual eyes in a
Right, right,
sense.
right. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and that's different, and that's different from, I think many who have not had these spiritual encounters from a near-death experience have a tough time understanding what that's like because it's an
Mhm.
assimilation of the essence of what's happening versus really the fleshly characteristics or the superficial aspects of a person. I mean, God was revealing to you these people, one of whom you had never met, but you had known of him,
Mhm.
and they had came to you. And I'm curious as to whether subsequent to that, if God maybe clarified to you as you've thought through this, why God showed you this or told you this, if you can look back on that and say, oh, now I understand, why he did that.
Yeah.
Was there that kind of clarity to what your
There,
experience?
there certainly is an appreciation for aspects of those relationships that I never got to experience. Like, wouldn't it have been neat to know my mom as an adult woman and me as an adult? Not having that, like my wife has a relationship with her mother in their adult years, and or never having had a relationship with my grandfather. To understand him or his personality at all, is interesting. So um, I think my kids too appreciate um, the important things, like they're writers, singer, producers in the music industry, but they've never drank or drug or smoked. And through my experiences and some of theirs, they appreciate that the personal attributes of those relationships, those personal relationships, is the most important virtue we have, an asset. Their relationship with each other, they all three live together. They look out for each other better than anyone. When they had a disagreement as children, we said, these are your best friends who will always have your back. So they appreciate those relationships, and they always say, I love you, when before saying good night, or good night and I love you, or before when they leave or hang up the phone. Every conversation and interaction ends with I love you, because you don't know if you'll see them again. And I didn't have that growing up as a kid until this experience, And a lot of kids, those are the things we hold on to. So
Did it
um,
make you a more loving person so you
yeah,
can impart that love to your children?
it does, and it's a catch-22. And I say this to the kids too. I say it still makes me afraid of losing them. So I always got to make sure I don't, better way to say this. I have to be consistent in my love and in loving others, so they know that they can trust that is who I authentically am. In my younger years, I'm guilty, convicted. Somebody interviewed me after I wrote the book and said he didn't until his adult years appreciate that your family, they love you the most, but they can't trust that you are who you are unless you can consistently be. I used to say, well, when I have my doctor hat on, I'm the gentlest, nicest sounding, nicest speaking person. but I've got to wear that same hat and use that same love language for them to trust and feel safe around me, you know. It's easy to let my PTSD come out when the day's not going perfectly.
And you did suffer from PTSD. Obviously,
Certainly,
you suffered from
absolutely.
PTSD.
I do. In fact,
Yes.
I just got a service dog because I work with PTSD survivors, but actually because I qualified for some physical disabilities, and boy, has that been an eye-opening experience during this past year. It's just because many suffer PTSD sufferers, and people don't know it. You know, especially in this crazy changing world we're in today. I mean, the parameters for PTSD were redefined recently. I mean, almost any, we all have our journey. We know. So it's
Well, it
been
wasn't really clearly understood or even defined at the time that you suffered your
right.
post-traumatic stress. That that was I don't know when the term was defined or expressed, but I think it's fairly recent. And you went through that, obviously carrying it through. But again, you're a practiced healer. I mean,
Right.
was that was your profession, and you did that. And I know I read an article that said basically that around a little over 50% of those physicians they are open-minded to the near-death experience. And the reason that article was encouraging, and it's actually on our website at randyk.org, I make reference to it, is that the clinician is the one closest to the patient at the time, point of suffering and even death. And the clinician is technically minded. The clinician is looking at the physical aspects, obviously, of the body and the mind. And for the physician then to say, well, there is this other place apart from the mind, the brain, because the brain, at some point, certainly at the point of clinical death, no longer is functional. And you are, a retired physician now from years of doing surgery, and so you accepted through your own experience. But let me ask you the question, Mark, for your peers in the clinical realm, how do they respond to your experience?
I wish I had objective numbers. Um, I think too, definitely today, people are more open-minded than they were. And this conversation could happen on rounds, uh, medical rounds. And maybe 10 years ago, it might have gotten, you know, stifled immediately. This kind of, there wouldn't be enough minds to give it a minute. So it wouldn't have survived. So I think if people are more open to discussing it, people are not afraid to share their religious background, or if they have one or don't have one. So at least we're open on that, and that it's out there for discussion. Um, I know I found resistance in the medical profession. If I tried to share my personal experiences, then it would indirectly involve religion in one way or another, and therefore you get some resistance. But people also resented that I had medical experiences or that I could identify with a burn patient. There were certain surgeons that just, you know, resented that entirely. The fact that I know what it feels like to have a skin graft, or I kind of know. I wouldn't even say to my patients, I understand, because his experience is different than mine, but I could identify with what it's like to get a skin graft. And there are certain physicians that would resent that. Um,
Hmm.
so I hope we are more open-minded, because a lot of those experiences are not going to have the objective data that people demand to believe, as we do.
That's interesting. The surgeons, you had a level of empathy for the patient, for the burn patient, that the other surgeons did not have,
Mhm.
and that they would have resentment or jealousy toward that. I don't know. It's kind of like how I feel sometimes when I speak to those like you, Mark, that I have that level of empathy because I'm there's no doubt whatsoever in my mind.
Mhm.
I don't speak or ask questions from a point of trying to understand the facts or the whether it's true or not. I ask questions from the point of wanting to understand the nuances of the experience itself because you know, I
You
want
don't
to
need
know the truth.
verification that it was true, right?
Yeah, it's no, and that's what we're about. How do we get your book? And we'll note it in the body of this YouTube message. Of course, this will be on
I
audio
guess
as well.
anywhere books are sold, and Amazon's best, fastest. Um, Baker Publishing is the company, great company, have published some phenomenal spiritual pieces of work. But Forge Through Fire and Amazon.com or on my website, drmarkmcd.com, where I share stories and blogs. We've been on a long hiatus, but COVID was, a big fork in the spokes for a lot of people. But a lot of other survivors have shared their stories, or I've shared them um, through some of my blogs. But no question, the awareness is there today. That's the good thing. I mean, whether or not people are open-minded and talking about it, you can't look anywhere without seeing that everybody's suffering something. Everybody's confused about what's true today, about where to get the right answers. And I only know one true author of one true story. And I thank him that I do know. And hope a lot of people get to know.
Amen to that.
Yeah.
It's a great way to come to a close of our discussion here. Mark, it has been indeed a pleasure
Thanks, Randy.
having you with us today. And again, we'll have notations in the body of this message. You can go to Amazon.com. Tell us again the title of your book that
Forge Through Fire.
I've read your book. It's a wonderful story. I love your storytelling in the
Thank you.
book, and it encouraged me, and I'm sure it will encourage everyone who reads that book. So, again, thank you so much, Mark, for joining us today.
Thank you, Randy. Thank you. It's been a pleasure, really.
And well, it's been our pleasure, and for those who are indeed in Christ Jesus, be of good cheer,
Amen.
because heaven is in your future. Take care. Thanks for listening. Please like and subscribe. And if you'd like further information, go to our website at randyk.org, where our mission is simple: to share the great news of God's love.